is the excellence box. And I have to say, this is an area where personally I can relate. Most recently, something came up and I can share in this area. And this is really as I was getting prepared for this yesterday, taking some things down. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is, I would have to say, the place where I personally relate and I coach people often. And I feel like it leaves us depleted. And he talks about that is the excellence box. Okay. And this is an area, and you want to think about 3 things if you want to kind of take inventory, but things that you do exceptionally well, actually, right? Probably things that you get paid to do. So this could probably be your job. Maybe it is a hobby that you have. So maybe you're really good at singing and people pay you to come and sing, or maybe you play an instrument and you do that. Maybe you do hair really well. People will have you do that, but that's not your profession, and it may be, right? But this is areas that we want to be aware of, right? Because it's called an excellence trap. So that's it. That's the excellence trap. Okay. Maybe that emoji will bless you. Maybe there's an area that you're thinking about that you're really trying to say no to. But this is an area where, for instance, he gives an example of working at a college and being, had an idea about how to solve something and raised his hand like, hey, why don't we do this? And one of his colleagues looked and was like, you're going to learn not to do that again, right? And he got signed up to be on a committee. And then the word on the street was, hey, you'll never have time to do your job because you're always going to be on these committees, because that was how their boss was. Like, okay, you got a thought? All right, you're going to be a part of the solution, right? So can anybody relate to that? I can relate with the last point that he gave, is that people will always be asking you to do more of this. And I have to say, when he talks about this in the workplace, and I think it also happens in our day-to-day life, right? So if you're a leader or you're really good at something, it could be something as simple as, let's say you have children that are in sports or they're in cheer, they're in band, and you're really good at making bows, right? And someone sees your daughter and she has these socks or bows, and it's like, oh, who got that? Oh, I do them. And then you look up and you're doing all of this stuff for this cheer squad, right? Or maybe you're a former athlete and people are like, hey, can you coach my kid? Okay, I guess I can, right? And then you end up, hey, Stacy, thanks for joining. You end up doing these things. So really think about it. And I say that because we can just seamlessly get stuck in that place. And particularly when we think about our friends and family, okay? Because as you're speaking, right, you go to an event and people are like, hey, why don't you be on this board? Why don't you help out with our PTO? Why don't you be the team mom? Or, hey, we need this in our family. We need you to step up and do it. Okay. So, can anybody think of something that they have been trapped in with the excellence zone? Something that you do. Remember, it's something you do exceptionally well. You probably get paid for it. People continually tap you on the shoulder, continue to do it. You can't get away from it. It's chasing you, right? It is chasing you, or so you think, okay? Those are things that we want to think about, and we have to, which I thought was genius, and I wrote this down, and it wasn't a pun on words, but it kind of is now, is these are things that sap our creative genius. So for those that just joined, we're talking about our boxes. This is chapter 5. The last chapter in the book, and he talks about the things that keep us from getting to our genius zone. So incompetence, competence, and excellence, right? And all of those things we don't really think about because we go about our day in life. But he talks about, in order to get out of these boxes, we have to realize that the directions are outside of the box, okay? Which means that you can't, from inside of the box, be able to even notice or figure your way out of it, right? So when you think about like, wow, somebody probably has to tell you like, hey, you keep complaining about doing this, but you always raise your hand. Or you're not too good at that, but you keep signing up for that task, right? It's almost like, if you can think, if I'm giving an example of that person that always raises their hand to bring that food in the family, and you're like, that's not your best dish. That's not your best dish. That's the incompetence zone, right? Like, why do you keep signing up for that? Okay, that's what you want to think about there. But each one, okay, make your list. So you need to partner with somebody out or be coachable. Be coachable so someone can tell you that, hey, can I get some feedback? So that's how we move to our creative zone, is we want to get directions from outside, which means that we need to take a partner. So can anybody think of who can be a partner for them to help them to get out of these zones? So you're trying to get out of incompetence, competence, and excellence to get to your genius zone. So who's the first person that came to mind that could be a partner for you? Let's write their name down. You can't make that potato salad. And nobody eats it, right? Nobody is eating a potato salad. It don't go with nothing that we're eating. So stop, please. But let's get our partners. Who is your partner? Let's put their name down, because this can help us move from a genius moment to genius action, right? Because we can actually do something about this and we don't have to harp on this. And you probably are thinking of an area that you have been wasting time as you're listening. You don't have anybody. Okay, y'all got to find some people who are your partners. Actually, we can't move on if we don't have help. And I say that because I think a lot of times people feel like, I think for me, as I was listening to this and kind of making these notes, and then we'll get into, I'll open it up, and maybe this can be something we could talk about as you're thinking about it, is we get into these just modes of life and we think that the person that can help us is so far away or in such a big position, but it really can be somebody that's just modeling what you want to do already, right? So if you want to get better at motherhood, right? Or you want to get better at being a good friend, who's already doing that? They can help you be that. Okay. So in this area, if you're working on saying no, who is somebody that has really good boundaries? That can be somebody that can look and see outside of the box how often you say no that you're just oblivious to, right? So that's what I want you to think about as you're going to your partner. And I can't wait to have some people chime in and share their thoughts there. So let's get to our commitment. Okay. So we are getting out the box. And we're getting in our genius zone, okay, which is not in these other areas. And if you didn't listen to the podcast where I talked about get in the zone, this was the chapter that inspired that conversation. And he wants us to make a commitment, right? And it's a fresh commitment. So we can all do it today. We're going to start today. And I want you to think about something that you feel like, right, is your true creativity. And there's 3 time commitments that we're gonna make or think about. And you're going to pick the one that works for you. And this is what he gives us as a gift in the book with your fresh commitment. And you want to think about, if I were to do this for 1 hour a day, and I don't know what it is when you think about your genius zone. For me, I've been noticing that probably networking, and not networking in that sense, but like connecting people is something I enjoy doing. It's something probably that was a gap for me that I wish people could have done. So it serves me and it serves others. And it's been in many ways, right? And I can describe it really in a lot of ways, right? So I feel like God has put me in different positions in life to be at that table, that how can I bring people here and to be above me if they should be there, right? Who do they need to talk to? If I'm working for an organization and they have funds or they have opportunities, can I connect that to the community that needs it? So I have actually thought about the time commitment, okay? So it could be that simple. Maybe yours is, I don't know. Okay. So think about it. I just gave you an example. So 1 hour a day. If I did this for 1 hour a day. Okay. The second time commitment is if I spend 50% of my waking hours doing this, what would happen? What does that feel realistic for you? Okay. And it may be based on whatever you feel like your true genius zone and creativity is. Okay. And you want to repeat that 2 or 3 times as you're saying what it is. And then the next time commitment is I'm going to spend all of my waking hours doing this. So for instance, if you're somebody that love is your spiritual gift and you know that's what you do, that may be very easy for you to do all your waking hours. That everything can be connected there, right? Everybody doesn't have the same gifts. Okay. All right. So does everybody have their time commitment? Give me a thumbs up. So 1 is 1 hour. 2 is 50% of my waking hours. And then 3 is all. Okay. And if you still haven't picked it up, he advises that we do that like 5 times just to kind of repeat it in our mind, whatever it is. And you want to write it down. Okay. And really, the next step in this chapter is talking about that journal up the spiral. Okay, so remember I walked you through all the places we were of feeling down, depressed, unhappy, time wasted, to now wooing and chasing after this creativity, spending our time here, fulfilling ourselves, being this light. And now we're working our way up the spiral, right? You know, people say a downward spiral, we're working our way up the spiral in this one. And that visual is so amazing. So the marker that we're going to use for ourselves is a year. So if you go back to that time commitment, if I did this for 1 hour a day in a year, I would be here. Okay. I'll use the 5-minute career hack. We were very clear that if we do this every week in a year, it would look like this. Now we are at a point where we're saying if we do this every month, in next year we'll be here. Okay. That's a marker. Maybe it's your health. If I can get my sugar regulated in a year, I will be here. Okay. So if I spend an hour focused on my personal well-being a day in a year, I will be off this medication. I don't know, right? That's an example. So that's the first one. The second marker that we're going to use is in 5 years. And I think this is so amazing, 5 years. And he uses this in a book is because I think sometimes we will overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 5 years, right? So right now, for instance, if you're in debt, you can be out of debt in 5 years. And I know you're like, oh, you don't know how much debt I'm in. No, I think you're underestimating how much can be done in 5 years, right? If you want to go back to school, you could have the degree that you want in 5 years. You could. You absolutely could. If you broke down these times and said, hey, an hour, right, a day, 50% almost, what could that look like in the time commitment? Okay, so these are things like this when we think about breaking free, we think about freedom, when we think about using our mental strength for ourselves and being aware of our time. So that's the spiral. And then the one he uses, the last mile marker, and maybe this is something you think about, is he talks about the deathbed marker. So if you can think about the end of your life and you think about reverse engineering that thing to say, hey, when it's all said and done, what do I want my spouse, right? What do I want my children? What do I want the people that knew me to be doing this for him? And his whole life was committed to his wife. I think he had been through all of these things, and that's what he wanted, the marker for her to know that he loved her, right? That was his goal in that part. But think about what that could be for you. I think for me, I'm gonna stick with a year and 5 years. I'm at a point now, and I know somebody put in the comments around leaving coworkers where they are. I'm in that space of like every breath I waste having a conversation. I say to myself, that's a breath I could have on my dying bed so I can say my last words to my child. And I know that sounds probably crazy as hell to somebody, but after COVID, I'm like, look, we don't know how much respiratory strength is going to take, right, by those years to do it. But those are our three mile markers. Okay. So to back it up, and then I'll open it up for any thoughts. But the end goal that he gives us as we wrap up is that satisfaction of fulfilling your life's purpose. And a lot of times people have not done that work, or maybe you've even had people pour into them in that way to think about it. They've been kind of a tool. But moving back to the journey up the spiral of really the satisfaction of fulfilling our life's purpose, or the adverse, right, of having no satisfaction when you don't know. Okay. So when you really think about that piece, that's the piece I want to kind of end on, is what it will cost you. Because when we started this, he talked about, if you didn't have a chance to see the first one, but in chapter 1, he talks about that it actually costs you nothing, right? But not doing is going to cost you everything. So he talks about, and what he meant by nothing is the entry ticket. So you get this ticket, the ticket is free. But once you get the ticket, it's going to cost you everything to get in the game. Okay. And I think that's what you want to think about, or we want to think about. I include myself in this, as you all know, when it comes to purpose, is by not doing the work and being on purpose, what that will cost us. So we can either have a life of extreme satisfaction, knowing we're on purpose, or the adverse and continue to have these unhappy, miserable thoughts and not have any satisfaction because we don't know, or we're fulfilling somebody else's purpose. Okay. So with that being said, that's how we get to our genius zone. So